The craziness of this election is finally behind us.
Yeah, thank God.
Yeah, right? So what are you seeing out there? What are some of the trends? You noticed anything? Has anything changed?
I mean, we came off of interest rates, being relatively high. Prices remained high when people thought that we're going to go down. However, they didn't,
Right.
In most markets, prices continued to go up even in 2024 in the midst of an election year. And I have to say, that's something that I've never seen before. I've never seen in an election year, whenever interest rates continue to go up and prices continue to go up. That's just a telltale sign of the last couple of years that we've all lived in. Yeah, so since the election, what's been going on out there?
The craziness of this election is finally behind us.
Yeah, thank God.
Yeah, right? So what are you seeing out there? What are some of the trends? And you've noticed anything? Has anything changed?
Yeah, I have. What's interesting is regardless if your guy won or your gal didn't win, I think people can just come together and say it's over, right? Like
Thankfully,
right?
Right? It's over.
I mean, a year of fighting, and how many people unfriended their buddy on Facebook or because of opposing viewpoints or whatever, right? So I think it's interesting because now, regardless, I think people realized, okay, well, the world's not going to end. We're progressing.
Right.
2024 is coming to a close, and now 2025 is upon us. And what can we look forward to for brighter futures? And I think a lot of people have real estate in their future.
Yeah.
I mean, we came off of interest rates, being relatively high. Prices remained high when people thought that we're going to go down. However, they didn't, In most markets, prices continue to go up even in 2024 in the midst of an election year. And I have to say, that's something that I've never seen before. I've never seen in an election year, whenever interest rates continue to go up and prices continue to go up. That's just a telltale sign of the last couple of years that we've all lived in,
Yeah, for sure.
At the office level, you run our next in office,
I do.
as far as the agents are concerned and things like that. What's their overall motivation going into 2025?
I think a lot of them are excited about, the opportunity. They've talked to a lot of families in 24, right? And a lot of people were talking about interest rates. They've talked about the election. They've talked about trying to find the right house. They've had all these concerns.
Wait until the election's over.
Exactly.
Wait until we see if the world ends.
Right. And I think in addition to just like that kind of stuff, just life in 24, I think a lot of people just had to deal with a lot of stuff, And I think people are excited to kind of hit the reset button and kind of get back to the things that make them happy, the things they enjoy, the things they've been looking forward to for so long. And I think real estate plays a really big role in that. And I think a lot of the conversations our agents are having with, some customers and clients and things like that out there are very encouraging. And I think a lot of people are getting to the point now where they're ready. They've waited long enough. They've seen what they want to see as far as, things happening, not happening, whatever it might be. And everyone's just kind of like, what is, let's just go finally do this thing.
Well, you know what it is? I think it's with these high interest rates. The number one story that I've heard is that people are kind of sitting the fence, even though they don't like their house anymore.
Right.
They don't like their neighbor anymore. They don't like the HOA anymore. I want to move, but I just can't give up this 3.5% interest rate that I got.
Right.
And I think that people now are getting so tired of waiting that people were like, I got to get my equity out of this house and I got to go buy.
Yeah.
So as far as interest rates are concerned, it's interesting to me that a slight tick in interest rate from 3.5, to 6.5, it's probably another $400 or $500 a month, which is certainly a lot of money whenever prices are already high. But that causes the entire market to slow down and people not to ultimately move.
Right.
So where do you think? So today we're seeing 6.5% or something like that. I mean, what are you guys hearing people say? If interest rates could just get to this, then I would just pull the plunge and I'd do it, man.
Yeah, I think for most people, they want that first number to be a 5, at least a 5. Even if it's 599, I think people are going to feel better about it.
Yeah.
And even with that, like if they feel like maybe, okay, well, it's starting to come down, let me go ahead and secure something now with a number that let's say it's 599, and then hopefully with over the next couple of years it continues this downward trend. I can refi later, but secure the house now before interest rates get so low that prices skyrocket as a result, and I'm having now overpay for what I'd be able to get it for today. I think a lot of, the consumer's much more educated today than what they have been like in previous years, just with resources that are available to them. So
well, here's the interesting part. The difference between 3.5 and 6.5 is significant, but the difference between 6.5 and 5.9, which would actually cause them to take action, really is not that significant.
It's not.
We're talking $50, maybe $75, maybe
Yeah.
a month.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see where if the market could find a way to come down a half point, maybe three-quarters of a point, everybody would, I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people would say, I'm so fed up with my situation that I'm going to get off the sidelines and go. And the thing that's intriguing is the number of home sales that's happening every year over the last 2 years has been 20-30% lower than the average year based on population sizes. So how many of those people are just sitting there with pent up demand? They're ready to do something, but they've just chosen not to. They've chosen to stay in their situation.
Yeah.
And like, so what does that mean for like 2025 and 2026 when these rates do come down a little bit?
I think you're going to see an explosive market. I think you're going to see, I think prices even though there's so many people that want prices and need prices sometimes to go down, unless of course you're selling.
Right.
But
Right.
If you're buying, you're hoping prices are going to come down. I think the realistic forecast is that's not going to happen. I think that prices are probably about as low as they're going to get today, and whether that be something people want to hear or not, I think that's just the reality, because as these rates tick down, demand is going to, as you mentioned, this pent up demand, it's just going to go crazy. It's going to skyrocket, and I don't think we're going to see something as crazy as we did like 3-4 years ago necessarily.
Offers.
Exactly. I don't think we're going to see that, but I think we are going to get back to multiple offers. I think we're going to get back to where sellers aren't needing to make the same level of concessions that they're having to make in the current market in order to get their home sold. And I think that it's just going to be much more competitive for buyers if they continue to wait. I think it's only going to get increasingly competitive.
Well, the average buyer out there. So now is actually probably, if that's the case, one of the best times to buy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because if you think about it, the average seller that's out there today, right? And you guys go out and walk houses and make offers on houses every single day. But the average seller that's out there, how negotiable is the average home seller out there today?
That has all to do with how long they've been on the market, right? If they've, once they hit the market, everyone always wants to test out the top end, which I don't blame them, and that's obviously what we want for them too, right? We want our sellers to maximize on the return on their investment that they've done in their property. And so, they're wanting to test out that top end. And so early on, we don't see a whole lot of flexibility, but I think as, these, especially last 6 to 12 months plus, looking back when they realize the house isn't moving as fast as they want, they're not getting offers. A lot of them aren't even getting showings, that they're realizing they're going to have to give, whether it be on price, concessions, both, whatever it takes to move the needle. Yeah, exactly.
It's a process. Yeah. Well, what's crazy about that is this. So I've got a house for sale, and I've got one house. Actually, I have 2 houses for sale. One of them I put on the market and it sold immediately. And then the other one I put on the market, and here we are 6 months later and it still hasn't sold. Well, that house that I've had on the market for 6 months, guess what? And it's priced well. I've got it staged. It's a beautiful house. We renovated this house. It's a beautiful house in a desirable area, and it just isn't selling. And that's what's interesting about today's market, is that you got to get creative, right?
Yeah.
And so in this particular house, what a lot of people don't wrap their head around is, how can we take a home seller that's been on the market and leverage that home seller to buy this rate down to where people are comfortable with it? Because the reality is, if they're in the 6s and they need to get into the 5s, well, we could petition the home seller to offer concessions, closing cost, whatever might need to be done in order for them to be able to get that to an affordable payment.
Right.
We had a deal the other day that was interesting. I don't know if you saw this or not, but we've got that new mortgage program that, the down payment can be financed into the mortgage, which is interesting. So on this particular deal, we had a home buyer that came in that said, hey, I have a down payment, but if I could get the seller to pay for it, or if I could finance it in, I'd rather do that. And so they financed their 3.5% into the mortgage. And not only that, they got the seller to pay for the closing costs. So these people showed up at closing with $742. That's how much they brought for their closing cost and their down payment, a total of $742, which is awesome. Which is amazing. I mean, that's a program that, our mortgage partner has that allows for that to happen. But the crazy part is if somebody shows up on that house that I've had on the market for, a couple months, listen, I'd be happy to buy their rate down. I'd be happy to pay their closing costs. I'd be happy to do whatever it takes in order to move that property, because I need to move on from it.
Right.
It's sitting there vacant, costing a payment for it. So I think most sellers in this market, if it's been on the market more than a month, I think they're willing to work with the buyer, which makes it the perfect opportunity for the average buyer to come in and say, let me find a house where the seller will buy this rate down and will negotiate before all the multiple offers start happening whenever their interest rates come down.
Right.
And then the interesting part is when the rates do come down, well, guess what? The same mortgage company that gave you the original mortgage will be happy to give you a refinance at the lower rate because that's just
Yeah.
another transaction for them. So if the rate today is at 6.5 and we can get the seller to help contribute to bring that down in the fives, and heaven forbid it go in the fours, which I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
But if it does go in the fours, guess what? That mortgage company will refinance you right down on the fours. And you already secured the house before all the prices shot up. You don't have to worry about multiple offers. I mean, you really have your pick right now. There's a decent amount of homes on the market. So it's not really a bad time to go out and start shopping for it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Inventory has definitely gone up, and it's a much more comfortable level today than what it was. You know, buyers can actually have the option now. They can choose, as opposed to, again, 3-4 years ago when it was like, here's 2 houses that meet your budget requirements that,
Pick
you know,
A or B.
that exactly, you know, like, and that's what you had to do, right? And by the way, you're going to pay $25,000 more
Because
than it's
there's
worth.
16 other people that want it.
Exactly. And that's thankfully not the case today for buyers. They do have more options to them. You know, but again, as this market heats up, we may end up seeing inventory could potentially tick back down.
Sure.
You know, especially if the sellers want, you know, who decide to still wait. I think the important thing, I think, especially for sellers to even think about in the market that I think we're in now and that we're going into, is because a lot of them here, like, you know, you talk about, you know, being willing to pay down the rate and stuff like that. And they think, well, that affects my bottom line. And they're right. It does. Most sellers are also buyers. Right. And I think that's really one of the unique things about it is if they also kind of put on their buyer hat in addition to their seller hat and think, well, where I may have to give a little bit on the sell side, it's also an environment that's more likely to give me leverage as a buyer as well. So it's one of those things that, yes, is there maybe a slight cost to you as a seller in the current market to get your house sold? Yes. But it's also an environment that you're going to have leverage as a buyer as well to go get those things before it gets crazy. So, you know, you're taking advantage of both, you know, yes, I need to get my house sold, but at the same time, I can go get a good deal for myself right now as well, which I think, you know, a lot of sellers, I think we're going to, and if enough sellers see that could help maintain that inventory so we don't see it dip down too bad. But
Well,
it's just
you're describing the inventory problem. The inventory problem is the fact that the more that people go buy, the minute they go buy something, they have to sell theirs, which somebody else then comes and buys that and sells theirs.
Right.
So it's a domino effect. And the way that the real estate markets gets loosened up is that first person taking that action and seeing the light and going and buying and then selling theirs.
Right.
And then they put theirs on the market and somebody buys theirs and then sell theirs. It's a domino effect all the way down the process. And whenever it's painful enough to not go buy something, well, that whole domino effect stops, which causes the real estate market to slow down. More importantly, it causes inventory to decrease because these people aren't selling their house, so that nobody puts a house on the market.
Right.
So there's nothing to go buy, which kind of, you know, is a circular process.
Yeah.
Have you seen that article that came out with the Post and Courier when they were talking about the number of 65 plus people that are relocating into different counties and things like that?
It said something about a gray wave or something like that, didn't it? Yeah.
Yes. It was interesting. I read this article and it was showing, you know, the number of counties out there that are going to have more people that are 65 plus living in the county, you know, by the year 2030, 2040 than are younger than 65, you know, and I thought it was interesting. And they've got an interactive map and I started, you know, clicking through that thing and looking at it. And what's wild is the population increase in South Carolina and in some of these counties in South Carolina is just ridiculous. And it's like the people that are coming and relocating to the area over the next 15 years, I was looking at it, it said 5.3 million people currently in South Carolina, and they're supposed to add another million over the next 15 years to get it to 6.3. So, I mean, we're talking about a 15, I think it's like an 18% jump in the next 15 years of an additional million people that'll be living here in South Carolina. And I started thinking about that and I said, man, where are they all going to go? And it's interesting. I was looking at the counties, you know, the counties in which they're growing, and some counties are actually decreasing in size. Some of the more rural counties are actually like down 10%, 20%, you know, and I guess people are, you know, maybe relocating to the city or moving out of the area. The infrastructure isn't there. But some of the bigger counties have the most growth. Like, for example, number 1 on the list, Horry County, Myrtle Beach.
Is that right?
47% increase between 2025 and 2040, from currently 405,000 people to 600,000 people, almost 200,000 additional people, and 47% increase. Also, the other thing that was interesting in Charleston County and Dorchester County have moderate increases, 7%, 10%. It's just not a lot of places to grow, right? There's
Sure.
not a lot of extra land that hadn't already been picked up. Dorchester County was 10, Charleston County was 7%. But the one that's crazy is Berkeley County. And Berkeley County is way more than 10%. It's projected to go from 257,000 up to 372,000 people.
Wow.
115,000 person increase, 44% growth, which is really interesting. And the other one that was intriguing to me is Horry County, Rock Hill, Charlotte area, and probably the number one on the list that was surprising to me is Spartanburg.
Okay.
Spartanburg County, Greenville County, both are going to increase in significant proportions. Let me show you Spartanburg's numbers real quick. 43% increase projected for Spartan County over the next 15 years.
Wow.
362,000 people up to 156,000 increase. And Greenville County, another one here, is 560,000 up to 700,000, 136,000 increase for a 24% growth. And it's just like, man, the amount of people doing real estate, the amount of people that are going to be working in real estate, and the number of transactions that are going to happen, it's nearly impossible for these home prices to go down whenever you're adding a million more people to the roster.
Right. I think the secret's out about places like around Myrtle Beach, places like Greenville, Spartanburg, things like that. Even Berkeley County, again, like for the longest time, these are areas that either had stigmas associated with them or people just didn't know about it.
Right.
And South Carolina as a state, I feel like we've really stepped up and done such a better job of just making the world know about, hey, we're here, we're amazing. And I think the United States as a whole has really kind of caught on to that. And they're picking, I'm not surprised at this growth. You know what I mean? I'm surprised just because we've not seen a ton of growth in those areas previously, maybe the Spartanburg, Greenville area, the last few years. But obviously around Myrtle Beach, like here, again, that's where everyone goes on vacations, right? Like, and now knowing this is where people are going to live and reside and stuff like that, I think it's, I think it's going to be great for the state to have that growth, that influx of people, that, just new things. But as you mentioned too, like if you're buying or selling a home, prices are not going to go down.
They can't. With a million more people, how could it?
Yeah. We don't have a million houses sitting out there empty for these people to go get into. So,
well, and that's not to mention, that's just the people coming.
Right.
That's not to mention the people that already live here that said, hey, let me go buy this house and sell mine, right? So it's not only the million new people coming, but it's all the existing people, the 5 million that are already here that also need to do their real estate transactions.
People that are renting, like it seems like every time I turn a corner, I see like either it's a new apartment building or something like that happening. And I see these
storage.
Yeah. People talk about interest rates. And I heard this a couple years back and it just always stuck with me. If you're renting, your interest rate's 100%.
100%.
It's 100%. And I was like, that's brilliant because it's so true. Like we have so many renters in this area that are throwing away their money because at the end of the day, right, when their lease is over, like they're not even getting their security deposit back in most situations, right? So they're walking away with less than nothing and have nothing to show for it and are starting over. Do I go rent again? Do I buy, whatever it might be? Whereas even if they didn't necessarily go get their dream house, if they just went and bought a house, a good starter home, a townhouse, like whatever it might be, they'd have equity that they could then roll into their dream home, or at least the next step towards their dream home, and they have something to show for like the years of this monthly payment they've been making because they own as opposed to rent, where now they have nothing, and instead they're arguing over $1,000 security deposit because they were hoping to pay maybe an inspection or something like that with that if they were going to buy a house.
Well, they are paying a mortgage. They're
paying somebody else's.
They're paying their landlord.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and then some.
And they get the tax write-off for paying the mortgage.
Exactly. There's no benefit.
Right.
No benefit to the with the taxes and everything like that, the write-offs that they can do, that they're paying on everything, not just taxes, but the interest rather, that they're, it's not a write-off for them.
So if somebody came today and said, hey, you know what, I want to think about the buying process. I want to, think about it. I want to learn more about it. Like, what does it look like? How do you guys do that? Like, if y'all sit down with somebody and say, look, let's walk you through the buying process of discovering what your payment could be, how much you could afford, what you're comfortable there. Like, what does that look like for somebody that's never done that before?
Sure. So what we love doing is bringing them in. We like having them come into the office, and the reason for that, because we have locations all across the state. And even if, let's say, someone can't make it to the office, we still like meet them in person, at least via Zoom, and helping first of all, get to know them a little bit, right? Like your needs for what you need in a house are different than my needs for a house, right? It's not a one size fits all. And so I'm going to get to know you a little bit. I'm going to find out what are your needs? What are your wants? What does that look like? What's your current situation, right? And then we're going to start looking at, okay, we want to then, let's get you pre-qualified. Let's get you pre-approved. Let's talk to a lender. Let's see where you're at financially. Let's see if there's some work that we need to do to get you where you need to be. Maybe, it's amazing the number of people that are surprised on what they can afford today. Everyone always thinks they have to have all this money saved up and stuff
20,
like
30,
that.
40%.
Exactly. But you just mentioned a loan product where they're able to take their down payment and finance it in,
right.
And so I think people, that finding out where people are at, and then we are able to really show them literally a roadmap that will take them through the process of, let's look at homes that meet your needs and again, that you can afford. A lot of times, buyers are out there, they start surfing, the Zillows, the realtors, the websites out there, and they're dreaming big, right? And they fall in love with all these houses they see, and then only to find out later, oh, I can't even afford that house. But that's what they've fallen in love with, right? We don't want them falling in love with something that's not attainable for them, because that's just going to lead to broken hearts the whole way around, right? So we start the process with, let's find out the numbers. Let's start sending you properties that meet your needs, your wants, your budget. Then we're going to go out, we're going to look at these homes, and we're going to educate you about those homes. We're going to let you know everything that we can find out. The seller has to disclose certain information about those properties. We're going to educate you about the house. We're going to educate you about the process. We're going to make sure you're comfortable so that each step you're taking, from looking at houses to writing an offer to negotiating repairs to, the appraisal process, a CL 100. What is a CL 100? No one can still tell anybody what the CL 100 stands for, but we know that it's looking for moisture and termites and issues like that, right? So, but we're going to guide our clients through that process all the way to closing, hand them off the keys, and they're off to the races and home ownership and building equity and building success for themselves
and building
long term.
dreams.
Exactly.
Building dreams. That's what it's really about. I think that's the thing that's kept me in real estate for so many years, is seeing whenever you give these keys to a new homeowner, and not only do they have a great investment and tax write-off, but they get to build families in this house. They get to have friends over. They have cookouts at this house. It's a sense of, it's turning a house into a home.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a lot of people don't fully grasp how beautiful that is, that live in the rental life, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And the other thing too that's wild is whenever we first start talking to some of these couples, sometimes, or you really even family members, we're like, what are you looking for in a house, right? Like, what do you want? And they're like, well, we need this many bedrooms and baths. It's like, okay, but like, what else? It's like, well, we just want to be something that our family can be happy in, right? And I think part of the process of bringing them in and sitting them down and having that conversation is to figure out that might mean something different to a family member A versus family member B.
Yeah.
Like, what are you guys going to use this house for to help build this? And oftentimes, the family will realize that they weren't fully on the same page until we help them investigate. Okay, how about yards? How about amenities? How about neighbors? How about, how does all this going to work? What's the proximity of where you are to schools and churches and shopping? And what is the whole component? Not to mention how much of the taxes on this house versus this house. When you mix all those pieces together, it just means something different. And oftentimes people that are trying to go at it alone and do the online search themselves just don't know how to factor all of those different things in together.
Right.
And I think that's what you guys bring to the table, is whenever you sit down across from the person and do a needs analysis and say, look, let's look at what all the options of a house could be and figure out what your comfortable payment is and how much you're total comfortable paying for a purchase price of a house. Then that'll really help people at the end of the day find the perfect house for them and to go through that process so that they know they got somebody in their corner versus having to go out and fight.
Yeah. One of the things I educate my agents to do is ask, like, if someone sits there and says, I need 4 bedrooms, ask why. Because because again, as you mentioned, let's say you're sitting there with your spouse and she's like, well, we really only need 3 bedrooms.
Right.
And you might find out, like, the husband's like, well, yeah, but I thought one of the bedrooms could be used as an office or a playroom. Exactly. Or, my parents are about to retire and I need a place for them to be able to come visit and stuff like that. And so like a lot of times by asking why to people, and again, with even simple things like bedrooms, fenced in yards, different things like that, you're going to get them talking and it's going to engage with you. And we're able to help them on such a higher level,
right.
than if we just were order takers that says, okay, you need 4 bedrooms, you need
Right.
2.5 bathrooms,
Right.
like you need to be in this county, this school district, all these sort of things, like even like with school districts, a lot of times people, young families will come in and we'll meet with them and they'll talk about, well, we want to be in this school district. And I'll be like, oh, that's great. I didn't know you guys had kids. How many kids do y'all have? Like, oh, we don't have any kids yet. And we're like,
right.
what? So, because a school district that's great today
May not be
great in 5 years,
Yeah.
right? But
Or
it's
you may
interesting.
move between now and then.
Exactly. So
Well,
it's
if I had $1 for every single time I've sold a house to somebody that said they had to have an extra bedroom for an in-law that may come visit,
right,
or for somebody that says I have to live close to the beach because I love the beach,
right.
So that's just a funny one, right? So it's like I'm willing to pay more to live close to the beach, right? And it's like, okay, that's great. How many times last year did you go to the beach, right? And it's like maybe 5 times, 6 times, 10 times. Okay, great. How many times did you go to your job? 150 times last year, right? So like I'm going to pay to live further away from my job that I have to go to 150 times a year versus, or the church that I might go to, 50 times a year versus the beach that I might go to 10 times a year. But at least I feel better about living closer to pleasure, right? And so like I watch people all the time that choose, I want to live here because of this thing that they love, where the reality is like you just got to, like, what is life actually like for you right now?
Yeah.
Versus what the life might be in 5 years.
Right.
Because by the time 5 years comes, the reality is if you actually hit that life that you're talking about, you're probably going to upgrade the house anyway.
Right. Exactly.
So you could buy that beach house later if you want.
Or there's a lot of people who won't buy because of what the price is to be closer to the beach as opposed to what they need. So they end up renting. And again, they're putting themselves in a bad situation when, as you just pointed out, like the things that they need that they could get a much more affordable that they're driving to every day, they can get a great house.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? At a price they can afford. And again, build that equity so eventually they can move towards their dream and their love of maybe being closer to the water down the road, but at least start doing what you need to do today to get you there.
Yeah.
And I just think again, it's one of those things, you don't know what you don't know. Right. Like, and we have a lot of people out there that they would love the idea of buying a house, but they're afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
Right. We have this culture, right? It's like people feel like they're shunned for asking for help, or it's embarrassing to ask for help.
So you need to go find it on YouTube.
Exactly. Right. And again, you go on YouTube, you're going to find 20 different answers, right? On what you actually need to do first. We help thousands of families, right? Like we served like 14,000 families nearly, something like that, since you've been doing this. Like we know how to help people.
Well, and not to mention what you find on YouTube could be different for this county versus that city versus that state, right? So it's not one size fits all.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is I hear, the other day I was listening to this lady that says, I got to find this house, but I only want to find houses with in-law suites. I'm like, okay, we could go look at 20 houses, or 2 of these will work for a potential in-law to live with you possibly in the future. Right now, if you've got a family member that has to have an in-law suite, okay, that's one thing. But this particular person was thinking maybe if grandma or aunt gets older one day and wants to come and live with me, then I'll be able to say yes and I won't have to say no.
Right.
It's like, so you're going to eliminate 18 of your 20 possibilities in a home search just because of the idea that this may happen one day. Right. And guess what? They probably, for every time I hear this story, it's like, okay, a year or 2 later, it's like, hey, did grandma ever come and live with you? Nope, she refuses to. And it's like, you know what? She was never going to in the beginning. She just didn't want to tell you that.
Exactly.
So you need to buy the house for what fits your lifestyle today, not what maybe. You can always trade the house in later.
Yeah.
You can move later. You're not stuck there. People, they just get into the house, get the equity, and then later you can trade up. Like, that's what real estate's about. That's the beautiful part about it.
Yeah. My wife and I bought a 5-bedroom house thinking we're having 2 or 3 kids, and we have 1.
Yeah, what?
And we're gonna have 1. So like, I got all these extra bedrooms, right? They're just collecting dust, that I got to pay somebody to clean. But
at least you get to pay the air conditioning bill every month.
Exactly, right? There you go. So I guess I'm building equity in a bigger house, but it just is what it is. Again, things, like you said, like you buy for now. And again, we can adjust as you go, but at least you're setting yourself up for success when you do need to make adjustments down the road, as opposed to continuing just digging the same hole you've been digging your whole life by renting.
Perfect.